Hi, I'm Ezra. I'm here with Ben Flerchinger, lead brewer of the Northwest Quimby Lucky Lab. And how long have you been brewing here, Ben?
I've been brewing at this location for about 3.5 years, and with the Lucky Lab for about 5 years. Brewing.
Nice. And how big is the system you have here at the Lucky Lab?
This is a 14-barrel system, but we're able to do 7 barrels on it too, so we do both, 7 and 14 barrels.
You keep you pretty busy. There's a lot of taps at this location.
Yeah, we have 18 different taps, so we've got to have 18 different beers on tap.
Cool. Well, let's take a look around.
Let's do it.
So we're here in the grand room of the Quimby location. You want to tell us about the malts you're using here?
Well, mostly our base malt is Great Western 2-row. We've got a silo here, holds 20,000 pounds. That's anywhere from 60 to 90% of a recipe. And then everything else, we've got, I think at last count, 30 different specialty malts that we can add in different ratios and different amounts to get different flavors, colors, different textures, all that good stuff.
Do you have any favorite specialty malts you use frequently?
I really like the Simpson's Golden Promise malt. It's kind of comparable to like a pale malt, so we use it as a base malt in beers like the Scottish Holiday and the Solar Flare. Just seems to be a little bit smoother than the regular 2-row.
Yeah, it's like isn't that a Scottish? I heard it compared a lot to like a honey character.
Yeah, it's got that little residual sweetness kind of that comes through and smooths everything out.
So is this a mill over here that you guys use?
This is our mill here. We've got an auger running off of our silo, and this is called a weigher dumper. So it weighs out 10 pounds at a time. That controls our base malt. All the specialty malts, we just dump it on top of that. Mills it, it gets augered again up here. And it drops it into, this is our grist case, so we can mill out, because it takes about an hour, sometimes an hour and a half to mill a batch of beer, or the grain for a batch of beer. So we mill it and we can hold it in there for the next day's brew, and we can do other stuff while we're milling, so we don't just have to stand in here and breathe dust and listen to loud noises. And then after the grist case, it'll get augered back up and into the mash tun, which is the next step. This is the mash tun, this is the next step in brewing. You can see up here the grain comes through that auger from the grist case we talked about earlier. It drops down and there's a hydrator on there where it mixes with the hot water. And so it drops down already mixed with the hot water, and it's a little less stirring. We don't have any power breaks or anything, so it's all manual. And it drops down, and there's false bottom here, so it's slotted screens. So we let it sit in there for about an hour, and it converts all the starches and the enzymes convert the starches into sugars, which later will convert to alcohol and CO2 with the yeast. So it sits in here for about an hour, and then there's a spray ball on top. We spray hot water through it, filters through it, and pull everything off, pull all the liquid off, and it runs over into the kettle, and then that's the next step. Yeah.
What kind of temperatures are you mashing in at usually?
We shoot for between 148 and 152 for most of our beers. Some of the stouts or porters are like sweeter beers that you want a little residual sugar left in. You mash it a little warmer, and that'll give you, that leftover sugar that won't ferment. So you'll have some sweetness in the beer.
And how big are these tanks right here?
This is a 14-barrel system, but we have it set up so we can do a 7-barrel on it as well. So we do like a full brew or a half brew, and it takes about the same amount of time.
So now we're up the kettle, is that right?
This is the kettle here. Yeah, it's like I said, 14 barrels, but we can also do 7 barrels in it. So when we're done sparging, we'll run all the liquid over that we need. It's called wort. Then we start to boil, and depending on the beer, we'll boil anywhere from 60 to 120 minutes, depending on what beer we're making and what we're trying to get out of the flavors. What it's doing in the boil is coagulating proteins that cause hazy beer and some other off flavors. And it's also sanitizing, and it's where we add the hops. The hops that you add at the beginning of the boil are more the hops that you feel rather than taste. And then as you get closer and closer to the end of the boil, the later additions are more aromatic hops because they don't boil off all those aromas.
Speaking of hops, like what kind of hops are you guys usually using, or like what are your favorites?
We use about 20 different varieties. My favorites are probably Summits, big fan of Fuggles, and obviously all the big sea hops, the Centennial, Chinook.
Nice.
Yeah.
So from here we go to the fermenters?
Yeah, we're going to stop at the heat exchanger and then we'll run into the fermenter.
Cool. So Ben, this is a heat exchanger. How exactly does this work?
It works basically like two car radiators pushed together. Cold water's coming in on one side, and the boiling wort, which is at 210, 213 degrees, it's coming through the other side. And what we want to do is chill it down to about 60 to 70 degrees, depending on the beer, so we can pitch the yeast right away and less chance for infection. Yeah. And we actually have two heat exchangers here. The first one we run chilled glycol through, and just city water through that to chill the city water down to about 34 or 35 degrees. And then that can chill down the hot wort a lot quicker. And in the summertime, the city water's coming in at 60 degrees, and we're trying to chill down to 60 degrees, so we obviously can't do it with 60-degree water.
And what kind of yeast do you use here?
We mostly use the 1056 Y yeast, American ale yeast. It's, I think, a really great yeast. It's really, you're able to do a lot with it. It's very diverse, and you can come up with a lot of different flavors.
What temperature do you find is the optimal temperature to pitch that yeast in?
Probably about 65 to 70 degrees. If you ferment it warmer, you're going to get more kind of a sweet, kind of fruity flavor out of it, and then obviously with the lower the temperature, you'll get a little bit drier flavor out of it. So you kind of want to try and find a balance between there, and depending on what beer you're making, like I said.
All right, well, let's check out the fermenters.
Absolutely.
All right, Ben, so these are the fermenters?
These are the fermenters. Yeah, we have 6 fermenters, 0 through 5. We've got 2 14s over here, and then 4 7-barrel fermenters. So when we're done, we pump the beer over at 60 degrees, and we have the yeast ready in kegs. We just pitch it in line as the wort's flowing over. All these tanks have a glycol jacket inside, so we can control the temperature. We like to ferment mid-60s. Fermentation can take anywhere from 6 days to 3 weeks, depending on the beer. And what's happening there is the yeast is just eating all the sugar that's in there, turning it into alcohol, CO2. When it's done fermenting, we check the gravities the whole time, and when the gravity gets low enough to where we want it, we can actually crash these tanks down to like 33 degrees. And what that does is basically just puts the yeast to sleep. It's too cold for the yeast to do anything. So it all falls to the bottom of these cones, and then we can harvest off the bottom of those cones for our next batch of beer.
So what's the next step after the fermentation?
Well, after we've got the beer cold, we pump it all into the next room, which is the conditioning tanks, and I'll take you in there right now. Let's go.
So Ben, you got a lot of beer conditioning in here right now?
Yeah, when we're done fermenting, like I said, we pump them into one of these tanks, do our conditioning. Condition for at least 10 days, maybe more. And we carbonate in these tanks, and then these lines here are all lines going up to the bar. So half of our beer comes straight out of the tanks. And then when a tank gets down, we've got these level indicators on there where we can see how full they are. When it gets down low enough and we want to put another beer in, we put all that in kegs, and then we've got another walk-in that we serve kegs out of.
What temperature did you say you kept this room at?
This room is a comfortable 38 degrees.
Nice. So Ben, what are we doing up here on the roof for Lucky Lab?
Well, I wanted to show you the solar panels that we use to heat most of the water we use in brewing. Heating water is a big expense, and we need a lot of hot water to make beer. So we had this system installed. These have a glycol water mix in them that heats up, and actually on sunny days it gets too hot and has to shut down. We've got a tank downstairs where the hot water, or the hot liquid coming out of here, goes through coil loops and exchanges all that heat with water, and then we use that water to heat up our brewing water, and that's substantially cut down on the cost of natural gas for heating everything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for the tour, Ben.
Yeah.
Wanna go try some of your beers?
Let's do it. Yeah.